She didn't cry out when the whip snapped against her back. She just sank to her knees in the dust, clutching her belly like she was still hoping there might be life inside it. There was. There never had been. Miriam flinched again as the leather cracked past her shoulder, this one missing on purpose. Barrett always missed the second strike. It was his twisted way of showing mercy. A game. But he'd hit her the third time. That one always landed, always left a welt to count the days by. She could track the seasons by the number of those dark, stinging reminders trailing down her spine. The barn door slammed open behind her, and she heard the crunch of his boots in the hay. She didn't turn, didn't plead. She just whispered her apology into the floor, though she'd already said it 5 times today. That didn't matter to Barrett. What mattered was that the cradle he built 3 winters ago was still empty. "You're a waste," he growled, each word like a boot pressing into her ribs. "A woman who can't make nothing but excuses." His shadow leaned over her, a smell of sweat and whiskey thick in the air. Then the whip rose again. Miriam's jaw tightened, but she didn't scream. A thin voice from behind the stable post cracked the air. "Stop." Barrett froze, Miriam's head lifted, barely believing what she'd heard. It wasn't loud, but it cut sharper than any lash. A child's voice, trembling, uncertain. Barrett turned on his heel. "Who's that?" From behind a bale of straw stepped a boy, thin as wire, no older than 9. Barrett's brows twisted. He didn't recognize the kid. Shouldn't have been anyone on the property. The boy's face was dirt-smeared, his boots too large, hands trembling at his sides. But his eyes didn't flinch. Miriam whispered, "Run." But the boy didn't. His lip quivered, but he stepped closer. "You don't hit her no more," the boy said again. Barrett scoffed. "This your ma?" he sneered. The boy shook his head. "No, but God don't like that. My pa used to say that. Said if you hurt a woman like that, your hands'll rot." Barrett spat in the dirt. "Your pa's a fool." The boy looked down, then lifted his chin. "He's dead, but he ain't wrong." Barrett took 1 step forward. The boy backed up, right into a man. Barrett stopped dead. Miriam blinked, trying to make sense of the silhouette standing behind the child. Tall, broad-shouldered, covered in dust and sweat from travel. A wide-brimmed hat shaded the man's face, but when he looked up, Miriam saw his eyes. They weren't like Barrett's. They weren't full of fire or hate. They were heavy, tired, but sure. "Boy," the man said, resting a hand on the child's shoulder, "go wait outside." "But Pa," "I said outside." The boy lingered, then nodded and stepped into the sunlight beyond the barn. Barrett straightened, trying to size the man up. "You lost." The rancher stepped forward, calm and steady. Saw the door open, heard shouting, thought there might be a fire. "No fire," Barrett grunted. "Just talkin' care of my own ain't your place." The rancher didn't flinch. He looked down at Miriam, then back up. "You call that talkin' care of her?" Barrett's jaw clenched. "She's my wife." "She a mule then?" the man asked, voice like gravel. "You beat her like one." Barrett moved fast, too fast for Miriam to cry out. But the rancher didn't flinch. His hand caught Barrett's wrist mid-swing like he'd been expecting it. "She ain't your property," the rancher said low. "Not anymore." Miriam's breath caught. Barrett yanked his arm free and stepped back. "You don't know who I am." "I don't care. I got law on my side." "You got lawmen who turn their eyes, maybe, but not justice." Miriam tried to stand, her arms shaking. She pressed one hand to her lower back, the pain deep and old. She'd had bruises for so long they felt like parts of her. She barely noticed them now. The rancher helped her up with gentleness she didn't recognize. She shrank from his touch at first, but he didn't press. He just steadied her. "You got a name, ma'am?" She nodded slowly. "Miriam." "You got somewhere to go?" Her mouth opened. Nothing came out. "Didn't think so," the man said. "My name's Thorne, got a place 3 valleys west. It's not much, but it's mine, and I've got room." Barrett laughed. "She's my wife, she ain't leavin'." Miriam said nothing. Her fingers curled into her palms, nails digging deep. Thorne looked at her. "You want to stay here?" She stared at Barrett. His lip-curled eyes filled with contempt. The same eyes that watched her every night, judged her body, blamed her for its failure to bear life. He never raised his voice when he hit her, never yelled. That was what made it worse. It was calm, routine, expected. "No," she whispered. Barrett took a step. "You leave and you'll have nothing. No money, no name, no house. You won't last a week." Thorne turned. "Then I'll give her mine." Miriam gasped. Barrett stared, stunned. "You'd marry this woman, you don't even know her." "I know enough," Thorne said. "I know what kind of man you are. And I know what kind of woman doesn't cry when the whip comes. That kind don't deserve to be left behind." Miriam couldn't breathe. Her heart pounded against her ribs. Barrett hissed, "She's barren." Thorne nodded. "And I've got 4 kids who need someone gentle, so maybe she ain't barren after all, just not in the way you measure." Miriam's knees gave again, and this time Thorne caught her fully. She didn't push him away. She wept. He wrapped one arm around her and led her outside. Barrett stood in the barn shadows, stunned. The boy stood by the wagon with his brothers and sisters, staring wide-eyed. Miriam blinked at the children, 3 girls and 1 boy, all wide-eyed, dusty, sun-darkened. Thorne helped her up into the wagon, like he was lifting something precious. "You sure?" he asked her. She nodded. "I don't know what I'll be, but I know I won't survive another night there." He tipped his hat, clicked the reins, and the wagon rolled forward. Behind them the barn grew smaller, but inside her chest something cracked open, not quite hope, but close. The road stretched long and dry ahead of them, dust rising behind the wagon wheels as the horses plodded westward. Miriam sat on the worn bench beside Thorne, her spine straight though every inch of her body ached. The pain didn't matter now. The sting across her shoulders, the bruises blooming beneath her skin, none of it reached her the way Barrett's words used to. She felt empty, drained of what had once tried to bloom in her. But beside her now sat a man who hadn't asked her to explain or apologize. He hadn't even looked at her like she was broken. The 4 children sat in the back. The youngest girl, maybe 5, kept her eyes fixed on Miriam like she was something rare, something not entirely real. The boy who'd first spoken up, Sam, Thorne had called him, rested his elbows on his knees and kept glancing toward the front of the wagon, not saying much now. The other 2 girls, one slightly older than the boy, one slightly younger, leaned on each other as the heat of the sun bore down on them. "Don't mind the quiet," Thorne said as they rode. "They're not used to strangers, or maybe I should say they're not used to hope." Miriam didn't respond at first. She wasn't sure what to say. Everything felt foreign. The road, the silence, even the gentle way Thorne held the reins in his hands, steady, calm, as if nothing could shake him. "You have no wife?" she asked finally. "Not anymore," Thorne said after a pause. "She passed 3 winters ago. Fever took her fast." She swallowed. "I'm sorry." He nodded once. She was good. Not easy, not soft, but good. Kept this family whole when I was barely holding it together. Miriam turned her head slightly, studying him from the side. His jaw was weather-worn, dark with stubble, his hands calloused, nails trimmed blunt and practical. There was a strength to him, but not the kind Barrett wore like a threat. This strength was quiet, enduring. She realized she hadn't looked a man in the eyes for more than a few seconds in years. "How long you been with him?" Thorne asked, not looking at her. 5 years. Thorne nodded slowly. Too long. Yes. They didn't speak again for miles. When the sun dipped low, casting gold over the prairie, the wagon crested a ridge and Miriam saw the ranch spread out below. A small house sat in the middle of fields that stretched out like quilt patches, fenced and grazed by cattle. A crooked barn leaned slightly to one side, and a row of clothes flapped on a line strung between 2 poles. It wasn't grand, but it wasn't crumbling either. It looked lived in. Real. "Home," Thorne said simply. The children hopped down before the wagon even stopped. Sam helped the littlest one out, and the girls dashed toward the house, shouting over their shoulders about something they'd seen in the tall grass. Miriam sat still. Her fingers were clenched tight in her skirt. "I don't know what I'm supposed to do." "You don't need to do anything right now," Thorne said. "I don't want to be a burden." "You won't be." "You don't know that." He met her eyes. "You ever had someone speak for you like you're not in the room?" She flinched. "Yes." "Then you understand. I'm not gonna do that." He offered his hand to help her down, and for a moment she hesitated. Then she took it. Inside, the house smelled of wood smoke, old leather, and bread. Miriam stepped across the threshold like she was trespassing, her hands still clasped tight in front of her. Thorne's eldest daughter, Lacey, maybe 11 or 12, peered around the corner with flour dusted on her cheeks. "She yours?" the girl asked bluntly. Thorne sighed. "Might be if she wants." Miriam opened her mouth to speak, then closed it again. Lacey nodded once like that was all she needed. "We got stew." They ate at a long table, the children crammed in like they always did, their elbows bumping. Miriam sat quietly, barely touching her bowl. She'd never had a meal where nobody raised their voice, or spat at the floor, or made her eat after everyone else. It felt wrong to be offered bread first, wrong to be passed the ladle. Sam leaned toward her as he chewed. "You look better now." Miriam glanced at him. "Thank you for earlier." He shrugged. He was wrong. Tears pricked her eyes. That night Thorne offered her the bedroom at the end of the hall. "Door locks from inside," he said. "Nobody comes in without knocking." She stood in the doorway, staring at the bed like it was a trap. The quilt was faded but clean. The pillow plumped. Her throat felt tight. "You don't have to stay," Thorne said behind her. "But if you want to, you've got the space." Miriam nodded. He tipped his hat, turned, and left her alone. She closed the door, locked it, and sat on the bed. She didn't sleep. Her body ached too much. But she didn't cry either. In the days that followed, she stayed mostly silent. She woke early, washed quietly, helped Lacey cook. She didn't ask questions. She didn't answer many. But the children, in their own way, accepted her. The youngest, Elsie, took to her the fastest. She'd crawl into Miriam's lap with a tangle of twigs and string she called dolls, and ask if they could be given names. Miriam always said yes. Thorne didn't press her. He worked the ranch, came in tired, and treated her like someone who belonged, not someone who owed him anything. But Miriam felt it, that hollow pit inside her. Years of being told she was worthless, a failure, a stain on her husband's name. It didn't go away just because someone else offered kindness. She kept waiting for Thorn to change, for him to raise his voice, to glare at her mistakes, to ask her what good she was to him. It never came, but the waiting hollowed her further. One morning, as she was hanging up linens on the line, Lacey came running from the barn. Miriam, Sam fell. She dropped the cloth and ran. Sam had been helping Thorn load hay into the loft, and he'd slipped from the ladder. He lay on the ground, eyes wide with panic, his leg twisted oddly beneath him. Thorn knelt beside him, voice calm. "Breathe, son, just breathe." Sam whimpered, "It hurts." Miriam dropped to her knees beside him. "It's broken," she said quietly. Thorn met her eyes. "You know how to set it." She nodded slowly. "Barrett broke a lot of bones, never his own, always mine." Thorn's face hardened, but he said nothing. Miriam took Sam's hand. "You trust me." His lip trembled, he nodded. She tore strips from her apron, found 2 solid branches, and braced the leg while Thorn held Sam's shoulders. He screamed when she said it, but she didn't flinch. She tied it off tight. Later, Thorn found her out back, scrubbing her bloodied apron in the trough like she was trying to erase her own past. "You saved him," he said. "He's just a boy. You didn't have to help, you chose to." Miriam didn't look up. "I don't know how to be anything but hurt." "You already are," Thorn said. "You just don't see it yet." That night Sam left a note on her pillow. It read, "You're already part of this family, we decided, even if you don't know it yet." Miriam wept into it. But the peace didn't last. A week later, someone came riding up the path. The children were inside, and Miriam was hanging herbs when she saw the figure. She froze. "Barrett." He looked thinner, wild-eyed, his horse foaming at the mouth. Thorn met him on the porch. "You've got no right," Barrett bellowed. Thorn crossed his arms. "She made her choice. She's mine." "No," Miriam said, stepping onto the porch behind Thorn. "I never was." Barrett's eyes narrowed. "You think he'll keep you, once he finds out what you really are?" Thorn turned slightly, not blocking her, not shielding her, just standing beside her. "I already know what she is," Thorn said. "Stronger than you'll ever be." Barrett sneered. "This ain't over." "You're right," Thorn said. "It ain't, because I'm riding into town tomorrow. I'm marrying her." Miriam's breath caught. Barrett's mouth opened and closed. "She can't, she ain't. She's worth more than you ever saw." Barrett turned his horse and galloped away. Thorn looked at her. "If you want that, marriage, I mean, no strings, no expectations, just a new name." Miriam stared at him, trembling. "I don't know how to say yes." "Then say you'll try." She nodded. He smiled. "That's enough." Miriam didn't sleep that night. The promise of morning felt like a weight pressing down on her chest. Marriage, again. The word itself left a sour taste in her mouth, not because of Thorn, but because of what it had meant the first time, what it had cost her. She sat on the edge of the bed with her hands folded tight in her lap, listening to the wind outside rustling the shutters. Somewhere down the hall, one of the girls coughed in her sleep. The sounds of the ranch had grown familiar now, the creak of beams, the ticking stovepipe, the low whinnies of horses in the stable. And still, she felt like a stranger in her own skin. Thorn hadn't touched her. He hadn't so much as stepped into her room uninvited. Everything about his presence was respectful, measured. He made space for her, but didn't demand she fill it. That was more terrifying than anger, because she didn't know what to do with kindness that didn't want anything back. The next morning, She wore the only clean dress she had that wasn't torn or stained beyond repair. Lacey helped her braid her hair back, and while the girl's hands moved gently, her voice was blunt as ever. "He won't change his mind, if that's what you're worried about." Miriam blinked. "What?" "Papa, he doesn't change his mind about people. If he picked you, it's 'cause he sees something good." "I'm not good." "Yes, you are." Miriam looked at the girl through the mirror's reflection. "You barely know me. You helped Sam, you helped me. You make bread better than I do, that counts." Miriam smiled faintly, but it trembled at the edges. They rode into town just after sunup. The courthouse sat quiet, only the clerk and a single witness waiting by the door. Thorne had arranged it all before she even said yes, or maybe he just hoped. He didn't speak much on the way there, and neither did she. But when he helped her down from the wagon, he offered his arm. She took it. Her hands were trembling, but her feet stayed steady. The ceremony was short. No vows beyond the standard, no guests, no fanfare. Just her, Thorne, the clerk, and a wrinkled older man who signed the paper and said, "'Bout time Thorne brought home someone smarter than he is." When it was over, Thorne turned to her and said, "You all right?" "I don't know what I am." "That's fair, you don't have to know yet." She nodded. They rode home in silence. Not a heavy one, but quiet, like the world had exhaled around them. That night she sat on the porch with Thorne while the children slept. The stars stretched thick overhead, and the air smelled like cedar smoke and soil. "I'm scared," she admitted. "So am I." "You are?" He nodded. "I got 4 kids and a ranch held together with rusted nails. I ain't exactly a prize." "You are to them." He chuckled softly. "Maybe. You didn't have to do this, marry me." "No, but I wanted to. Not 'cause I pity you. Not 'cause I need help with the children. I don't like the way you look when you're waiting to be hit, or the way you shrink when someone raises their voice. I want to show you what it's like to live without that." Her throat tightened. "What if I never stop flinching?" "Then we take it one day at a time. You flinch and I stay, that's the deal." A tear slipped down her cheek, and she didn't bother to wipe it away. "Barrett will come back." "I know." "He won't stop." "I know." She looked up at him. "You'd fight him." "I already did. I'll do it again if I have to." Her voice dropped. "He's dangerous." "So am I, when it comes to people I care about." That silenced her. For the first time in years, she believed someone might actually mean it. But peace was short-lived. A few days later, while Thorne and Sam were in the south field fencing a broken post, Barrett returned. He didn't knock. He didn't shout. He waited until Thorne was gone, then slipped into the yard with 2 other men, hired hands Miriam didn't recognize. They blocked the back door while Barrett entered through the front. Miriam was in the kitchen with Lacey and the younger girls preparing lunch. She heard the door creak, then heavy footsteps. When she turned, Barrett stood in the entryway with a look that curdled her blood. "Hello, Miriam." Lacey moved first, placing herself between Barrett and her sisters. "You're not supposed to be here." Barrett smirked. "Little girl, you don't tell me what I'm supposed to do." Miriam stepped forward. "Don't touch them." "I ain't here for them. I'm here for what's mine." "I'm not yours, not anymore." Barrett pulled out a folded piece of paper and waved it like a weapon. "This says otherwise. Marriage certificate, signed and legal." "I have one too, a new one." "I don't recognize that one." You don't have to, the court does. He stepped closer, and the girls whimpered behind Lacey. You think you can just run off and play house with a rancher. You think you can forget what you are. Miriam's voice shook, but her spine stayed straight. You don't get to define me anymore. Maybe I ought to remind you who made you a woman. The moment the words left his mouth, she slapped him. Hard. Her hand stung, but it felt like reclaiming a piece of herself. Barrett's eyes widened, not with pain but disbelief. Before he could strike back, the door burst open behind him. Thorne! He stormed in like a thunderclap, fists clenched, eyes burning. Get out! Barrett turned. You think you can take what's mine? She's not property. She's my wife. No, Thorne growled, stepping forward. She's mine now, and not because I bought her, because she chose. Barrett lunged. The fight was fast and violent. Fists flew. Thorne took a punch to the gut, then to the jaw, but he didn't fall. He drove his shoulder into Barrett's ribs and slammed him into the wall. One of Barrett's men tried to intervene, but Sam appeared at the doorway with a shotgun in his small, steady hands. Don't! The man backed off. Thorne pinned Barrett against the beam and hissed through clenched teeth. You ever come near her or these children again, I will bury you under the barn. Barrett spat blood. You think she's worth fighting for? Thorne leaned in closer. I'd fight the whole world for her. Barrett broke then, not just in body but in spirit. His bravado collapsed and he sagged in Thorne's grip. Go, Thorne ordered, and take your dogs with you. Barrett left. No more threats, no more arrogance, just a broken man dragging his pride behind him. Miriam fell to her knees once the door slammed shut. Thorne knelt beside her, cradling her gently. I'm sorry, she whispered. For what? For bringing danger here. You didn't bring it, he followed you. That's not your fault. I thought he'd never stop. Well, Thorne said softly, he's gone now. That night Miriam didn't cry. She held Elsie while the little girl slept, and she didn't flinch when the wind rattled the shutters. Thorne sat across from her, nursing his bruised knuckles, watching her with quiet awe. You're stronger than you think, he said. No, I'm just tired of running. Then rest here. And for the first time in years, she did. The following week passed in a haze. The air on the ranch seemed different, not lighter, not entirely safe, but still. Like the dust had finally settled after a long storm. Barrett hadn't come back. Not yet. And every day he stayed gone, Miriam breathed a little deeper. Still, Thorne kept the rifle leaning against the kitchen wall, and Sam walked taller when he carried the shotgun slung across his chest while checking the fence line with his father. Even the girls understood. Trouble hadn't vanished. It had simply retreated to reload. But in the quiet that followed, something else began to take root: belonging. Miriam woke early now, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. She braided Elsie's hair with care, let Ruth teach her how to cook cornbread without burning the crust, and sat on the porch with Lacey every afternoon mending clothes and listening to the wind. Lacey had the soul of a woman far older than her years, and Miriam could see in her something she recognized, a girl who had watched too much pain and learned too soon how to hide it. You ever afraid he's coming back? Lacey asked one evening. Miriam didn't look up from the dress she was patching. Every day. Me too. She glanced over. Barrett never touched you. No, Lacey said, but he touched you, and that's close enough for me to hate him. Miriam paused, then nodded. It's all right to hate people like that, as long as it doesn't turn you into them. Lacey looked away, blinking faster than she wanted. Sometimes I think I already am. You're not. How do you know? Because you stepped in front of your sisters when he came through the door. That's not what people like Barrett do. Lacey didn't answer, but she leaned just slightly against Miriam's shoulder. And for a long time, neither of them moved. Thorne, meanwhile, had grown quieter, not distant, but measured, like he was waiting for Miriam to come to something on her own. He didn't press, didn't push. He still rose before dawn to tend the fields, still took Sam out riding to teach him to track elk. But when he came in at night, he looked at her like she was something holy and bruised all at once, something that needed care, not ownership. That unnerved her, because she had nothing left to give and no practice in being cherished. It came to a head one morning when Thorne found her outside the barn, splitting logs with her arms shaking from exhaustion. "You don't need to do that," he said gently. "I know." He approached slowly. "Then why are you?" "Because I don't know how to be still. If I stop moving, I'll remember what it felt like to live in fear, and I don't want to feel that anymore." He looked down at her blistered hands. "Come inside. Let me show you that you don't have to earn safety here. You already have it." "I'm not afraid of work." "I know. I just don't want you bleeding to prove something that don't need proving." She let the axe fall from her fingers. Inside, he wrapped her hands with a gentleness that made her heart ache. No man had ever touched her without taking something from her. Thorne only gave. "Why do you keep looking at me like that?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "Like what?" "Like I'm not broken." "Because you're not." "But I flinch." "That don't make you broken." "I can't have children." His hands paused, then resumed rapping. "I didn't marry you for more children." "You have 4 already." "And I wouldn't trade a single one of them for anything. But I didn't ask you here to give me more. I asked you here to give yourself a chance to heal." She swallowed hard. "What if I never do?" "Then I'll still be here." His answer came without hesitation, and it broke something loose in her. That night she cried, not from fear but from relief. Thorne held her while she did, not asking questions, not trying to solve what couldn't be solved, just holding her steady like a dock to a broken ship. And still, peace was a luxury the West rarely gave freely. One cloudless morning, Thorne rode into town for supplies, taking Sam with him. Miriam stayed behind with the girls. The routine was simple: chores until noon, rest during the heat, supper started before dusk. But just after lunch, a rider approached from the ridge, a lone figure, fast and kicking dust. She stepped onto the porch and shaded her eyes against the sun. It was Barrett. It was the sheriff. He pulled up and dismounted, his face carved with weariness. "Miriam." She stepped down, nerves rising like old ghosts. "Sheriff Boyd." "I need to speak with you." She hesitated. "About what?" "It's Barrett." Her breath caught. "He's dead." The porch railing steadied her. "How?" "Found in a ravine west of town. Shot twice. One to the chest, one to the head, dumped like a sack of wheat." Miriam said nothing for a long moment. The girls stood in the doorway behind her, silent. "You think I did it?" she asked finally. "No," Boyd said, "but I think someone did it for you." She folded her arms tight. "That make you nervous?" "What makes me nervous is a man like Thorne, and a woman like you having a reason to lie." "We didn't kill him." "Then you should know his brother S in town now. Chet, meaner, less stupid, claims he's next of kin and wants answers. Miriam went cold. We don't owe him any. I agree, but he ain't likely to care, just be careful. Boyd left, dust trailing behind him like a warning. That night when Thorne returned and she told him the news, his jaw tightened, but not in surprise. You knew he was dead. I hoped. Did you? No, he said, but I would've if it came to that. They didn't speak much after that, but the unspoken weight between them grew heavier, because with Barrett dead, Chet was now the threat. And unlike his brother, Chet didn't have anything to lose. He wasn't tied down by pride or pretense, just revenge. 2 days later, the first sign came. A chicken coop ransacked, feathers scattered, no meat taken. Then the barn door unlatched, horses spooked, Lacey's mare limping from a fresh cut along its flank. Then finally, a note, nailed to the porch post with a hunting knife. You took my brother, now I take what he wanted. Miriam's hand trembled as she read it aloud. Thorne took it from her and stared, jaw grinding. We need to go, she whispered. Take the kids and go. No. Thorne. I won't run from men like him. Not again. Not with you and the children. But I've already buried one monster. I can bury another. That night they didn't sleep. Thorne and Sam kept watch in shifts. Miriam sat up with the girls, singing softly even when her voice cracked. At dawn, smoke rose from the eastern field. A fire. The hay shed. Thorne and Sam ran with buckets. Miriam followed, beating at the flames with a wet quilt. It took hours, but they saved the barn. When they finally collapsed in the dirt, panting and soot-covered, Sam looked at his father and said, He'll keep coming. I know, Thorne replied. What do we do? Thorne looked across the field, jaw set. We don't wait anymore. That night he packed the wagon with food, wrapped the girls in quilts, and kissed Miriam's forehead. I'll end this, he said. You keep them safe. She gripped his coat. Don't go alone. I'm not Sam S. coming. Thorne. If anything happens to me, you take this ranch and raise them. Can you promise me that? No. He smiled faintly, then fight for me to come back. She kissed him. He rode out in the dark, with Sam at his side and vengeance coiled behind his eyes. And Miriam stood at the edge of the porch, her breath shallow, heart pounding, every bone in her body aching for him to return. The night held its breath. Miriam stood at the edge of the porch long after Thorne and Sam had disappeared into the shadows. She kept her hand on the rifle, fingers stiff with fear, eyes burning from smoke and exhaustion. Lacey, Ruth, and Elsie slept in a tangled pile inside the parlor, their rest thin and fretful. The farmhouse creaked in the wind, and somewhere a coyote called out like a warning. She didn't dare go to bed. She couldn't, not when Thorne was out there, tracking a man who had nothing to lose and a twisted reason to fight. Hours passed, and then just before dawn, the sound of hooves. She bolted upright, raised the rifle, and stared into the gray. 2 horses emerged from the fog. One rider slumped forward, the other barely hanging on. It was Sam. But Thorne. Miriam dropped the rifle and ran barefoot across the yard. Sam dismounted awkwardly, his face streaked with dried blood. His voice was hoarse. He's alive, but he needs help now. She helped him lower Thorne from the saddle. He was barely conscious, one eye swollen shut, a long cut down his side seeping through a torn shirt. His breathing was ragged, mouth bloodied, hands trembling from blood loss and cold. "Chet," she whispered, guiding Thorn's weight onto her shoulder. "Gone," Sam said. "He won't come back again." Inside, they cleared the dining table and laid Thorn flat. Miriam worked quickly, cleaned the wounds, stitched the gash in his side, wrapped his ribs, prayed under her breath until her voice broke. Sam stood nearby, fists clenched, silent. He had grown older in a single night. His boyishness was gone. What remained was something sterner, harder, molded in fear and forged in love. Miriam paused to look up at him. "Tell me what happened." He hesitated. "I need to know." Sam sat down across from her and stared at his father's face. "We found him at the old mill. He was waiting. He shot first. Papa took one in the shoulder, but he kept moving like nothing hit him. He tackled Chet and they rolled down the ridge. I thought they were both dead, but Papa got up. Somehow. I got there in time to keep Chet from finishing it." "You killed him." Sam didn't answer, but he didn't need to. Miriam reached out and gripped his hand. "You protected your father." "I didn't want to kill anybody." "Good," she said softly. "That means you're still human." Thorn stirred then, groaning as he blinked up at the beams of the ceiling. His voice was a cracked whisper. "Miriam." "I'm here." He tried to sit up, but she pressed her hand against his chest. "You don't move, you just breathe." He obeyed and his eyes found hers. "Is he gone?" She nodded. "You won't have to fight again, you did enough." For the next 3 days, Thorn barely spoke. Miriam kept him fed with broth, slept on the floor beside the couch, and sat through the nights watching him breathe. The girls tiptoed around, quieter than usual. Sam never left the porch. He cleaned his rifle twice a day, never said why. On the 4th morning, Thorn opened his eyes and said, "I want to see the sun." Miriam helped him to the rocking chair on the porch. They wrapped a blanket around him, and the girls brought tea. He sat in silence a long time. "Then I thought I wouldn't come back." "You did," she said. "That's what matters." He looked at her hand on his. "You stayed." "I always would've. I'm not the same man anymore. I don't want you to be." He looked at her then, really looked. "Miriam, I want to ask you something, but I want you to know it comes with no pressure, no burden, just hope." Her breath caught. "I know you've carried more pain than most women ever should. I know you didn't come here to be anyone's wife again. I never expected more from you than what you were willing to give." "Thorn, but if there's a part of you that wants to be loved, not owned, to be chosen, not claimed, then I want to ask you, when I'm strong again and we've both had time to breathe, would you marry me?" Tears filled her eyes. "You don't have to answer now," he added quickly. "Just yes." He blinked. "Yes. Yes, Thorn, you didn't just save me from Barrett. You showed me there's still something good in the world. I want to build that with you." He took her hand, and they sat quietly, the wind moving over the porch, brushing across two people who'd been broken and slowly made whole. But healing wasn't always a straight line. That afternoon, a telegram arrived. Sam retrieved it from town. Miriam read it in silence, her stomach turning. Barrett and Chet had another brother, the youngest, Luther. He'd been in Yuma prison, released 3 weeks ago. Word had reached him that both his brothers were dead. And he was coming. Sam didn't flinch. "We can handle him." Miriam shook her head. "I don't know if we should." "You want to run?" "No, I want to end this in a way that doesn't leave you a killer. Not again." He didn't respond, but his shoulders slumped. That night Miriam couldn't sleep. She went to the barn, saddled the mule, and rode into town under cover of darkness. The town marshal, Ephraim Carver, was a tall, retired soldier with one leg shorter than the other and a voice like sand. When she told him the news, he leaned back in his chair and rubbed his jaw. "Luther Bain, yeah, heard he was out. You say you didn't kill the other two?" "No, but someone did, and he'll come looking for blood. I want to stop this before it reaches my children." Carver nodded. "There's one way." "Which is?" "We intercept him, bring him in, make it clear there's no war left to fight." "You think he'll listen?" "Nope, but that's why we'll bring chains." The next day, Carver and two deputies rode out with Miriam. Sam stayed behind to protect the house, his rifle loaded, eyes hard. They found Luther Bain near the eastern ridge, riding a black gelding, sharp-eyed, dressed in a preacher's coat that didn't fool anyone. When he saw Miriam, he grinned. "Well, well, the pretty one." Carver raised a hand. "Don't." Luther's smile faded. "You with the law?" "I am, and the law says you ain't welcome." "I ain't here to cause trouble." "No, what are you here for then?" "To bury my brothers." "They're already in the ground." "Then I'll dig them up and see for myself." Miriam rode forward. "They died trying to hurt me. If you think you'll succeed where they failed, you'll leave in a box." Luther's eyes narrowed. "You got fire, but fire burns out." "No, fire purifies." She pulled a shotgun from her saddle. "And I've had enough of being scared." Carver signaled. The deputies moved fast. Luther reached for his holster, but Miriam already had the barrel pointed at his chest. "Don't," she said. He froze. "You ain't your brothers," Carver told him. "Don't end like them." For a long moment, no one moved. Then Luther spat on the ground. "You think this ends it? There's more of us." "I don't care," Miriam said. "You come near my family again, I'll send you to meet the rest." They cuffed him and rode back. No trial was needed. Warrants on Luther stretched from Texas to Arizona. He'd hang before winter. Back at the ranch, when Miriam told Thorne what happened, he stared at her like seeing something he hadn't before. "You're not who you were," he said. "No," she replied. "I'm not, and I'm glad." He reached for her hand. "So am I." Over the next month, the ranch healed. Thorne walked again. Sam laughed again. The girls sang again. And one evening, as the sun dipped behind the pines, Miriam stood barefoot in the grass in a simple white dress. Ruth carried a bouquet of wildflowers. Lacey held the Bible. Sam gave her away. Elsie cried through the whole ceremony. Thorne whispered, "You sure?" She nodded, "More sure than I've ever been." He kissed her. And in the silence that followed, the land seemed to breathe again. Miriam was no longer property. She was no longer a bruised wife hiding behind locked doors. She was a mother, a protector, a wife by choice. And for the first time in her life, the fire inside her didn't burn her from within. It lit the way forward. Miriam never truly believed in peace until she tasted it. It wasn't loud or full of grand gestures. It was in the small things, the way Thorne walked now without pain, how Sam taught Elsie to ride a horse with patience instead of showing off, the sound of Ruth's quiet giggles echoing off the barn walls. Even the dogs barked differently, less like warnings and more like welcome songs. She found herself waking without dread, without that sharp crack of fear that had once greeted her every morning under Barrett's roof. She could look in the mirror now. The woman who stared back had lines around her eyes and a silver strand or two in her hair, but her gaze was unbroken. And that was everything. But she still checked the locks twice each night. Not from paranoia, just memory. Scars don't vanish, they settle. And sometimes, just as you're learning to breathe again, the wind changes. It began with the arrival of a letter. No return address, just her name. Miriam opened it slowly at the kitchen table while Thorne mended a gate out back and the children napped. Her fingers trembled not out of fear but intuition. The paper inside was crisp, new. The handwriting was unfamiliar. But the message was clear. You think you've won. You buried 2 snakes, but the nest is deeper. You were his wife. That means you belong to us. There was no signature. Just an address, Burning Rock, Colorado. She read it again, her breath slowing. Then she stood. When Thorne walked back in with dust on his boots and sun on his shoulders, she showed him the letter without a word. He read it, his jaw clenched. Someone's trying to pull you back into a past you escaped from, he said. I won't let them. You think it's a threat. It's a promise. He sat down, his brow furrowed. We could ride out there, confront whoever wrote it, end this once and for all. No, she said quietly. That's not what this is. It's not about confrontation, it's a message. Then what do you want to do? She stared out the window. I want to know who still believes I'm his, because until that's severed, I'm not free. Thorne reached across the table, covered her hand with his. Then I'll ride with you. If there's still a chain on you, we'll break it together. That night Miriam packed her saddlebag. Just a pistol, her old wedding band, still scratched from years of pain, and the letter. She kissed the girls goodbye. Sam said he'd guard them like a soldier. He meant it. At sunrise, she and Thorne rode north. The trail to Burning Rock wasn't marked on many maps. It curled through the edge of the Badlands, past ravines and rock faces that whispered with the wind. After 2 days' ride, the green vanished. Only dust remained. Burning Rock was barely a town, more like a collection of sins disguised as buildings. 1 saloon, 1 sheriff's shack, and a handful of wooden homes slumped against the hills like they were hiding from something. The air smelled like old fire. They dismounted near the saloon. An old man sat on the porch whittling. He didn't look up. Miriam approached. You know who lives at this address? She held out the paper. He glanced, nodded toward a house at the far end of the street. Sister lives there. She keeps to herself. Sister. Barrett's sister. The blood in Miriam's arms went cold. Thorne stepped up beside her. You sure? The old man looked at Miriam. You his widow? She didn't answer. He nodded again. Figured she's been waiting. Miriam left her horse and walked, slowly, deliberately. The house was narrow, with faded curtains drawn over the windows and a cracked step leading to the porch. Miriam climbed it without hesitation and knocked. The door opened. The woman looked older than Barrett, with sharp eyes and a mouth that hadn't smiled in years. Her gray hair was tied in a neat braid, her hands rough from work. I was expecting you, she said. Miriam stared at her. Why'd you send the letter? The woman didn't answer, just stepped aside. Inside the house was bare. 1 chair, 1 lantern, 1 Bible, and in the corner a locked chest. You were his wife, the woman said, sitting in the single chair. That makes you family. No, Miriam replied. That makes me a survivor. The woman tilted her head. You think escaping a man erases him. It erases his hold on me. Not quite. You didn't just marry Barrett. You married into the oath. Miriam narrowed her eyes. What oath? The woman leaned forward. Bane men were raised by rules. Rules written by our father and his father before that. You don't leave your husband. You obey. You multiply. And if you fail, you get whipped, Miriam cut in. Beaten, shamed. No, you get corrected. Miriam stepped closer. He was a monster, and so are you if you believe that. I don't care what you call me. You broke the oath. You dishonored his name. That requires a reckoning. Miriam pulled the pistol from her belt. No, that requires a burial, and I already gave him one. The woman smiled for the first time, a slow, joyless thing. You're not the only wife who broke the oath. There are others. Women who fled, women who ran. You want to be free. You'll have to free them too. Miriam paused. Where are they? The woman looked at the chest. It was padlocked, but Thorne entered, saw it, and didn't wait. He pried it open with the butt of his knife. Inside, papers, dozens, marriage certificates, letters, names. Miriam's stomach turned. These women, the woman said. Barrett's brothers owned them, cousins too. Some were sent to the hills, some married off to drunks. You weren't the worst off. You're proud of that. I'm not ashamed. Miriam stood up straighter. Then I will be the shame you remember every time you close your eyes. She took the chest, slammed the lid shut, and carried it outside. Thorne followed. What now? We find them, one by one. They burned the house down behind them. Back at the ranch, Miriam brought the chest to Marshal Carver. When he read through the names, he paled. We've got girls in the hills reported missing for years, he said. Some of these names match. You're telling me this is part of a system? Yes, she said, and I want to tear it down. It took weeks. They rode county to county, found women in cabins, hiding in cellars, sleeping in barns. One was blind in one eye. One couldn't speak anymore. One had a baby she hadn't named because she was never allowed. Each one clutched the name Bane like a ghost. Miriam wrapped them in blankets, gave them food, and told them the truth. You don't belong to him anymore, or any man who says you do. They wept. Some stayed on the ranch, some left for their own peace. But each one planted a new seed. The day they buried the chest, locked and sealed under the tree where Thorne and Miriam had first sat together, was the day the past finally stopped breathing down her neck. At dusk, she stood over the mound and whispered, "No woman should have to bleed to earn her freedom." Behind her, the girls laughed. Thorne came to stand at her side, his arm around her waist. "They won't," he said, "not as long as you're here." She looked up at him. "And if I'm not?" He smiled. "Then they'll remember your fire and light their own." The stars came out. The land was quiet. And for the first time, Miriam knew she hadn't just escaped a man. She had ended a legacy. The wind that swept through the Bane ranch that final spring did not carry pain anymore. It rustled the grass gently, fluttered clean linens on the line, and stirred children's hair as they ran laughing between fence posts. That land, once cursed by cruelty, now held a kind of quiet reverence, as if it understood what had been broken there and what had been rebuilt. The grave of the chest remained untouched beneath the broad old oak. Miriam passed it daily without pause. She didn't need to kneel there. She had already done her mourning. That grave wasn't a place for grief. It was a warning, a marker, the final end to a name that had lived too long and hurt too many. It had taken months of hard riding, tearful talks, and more courage than Miriam knew. She still had to reach every woman on that list. Some were just girls, barely grown. Others bore the years of silence like heavy chains, speaking little and trusting less. But with time, each one had found shelter. Some stayed on her in Thorn's land. Others chose to start new in distant towns where the Bain name couldn't follow. No matter where they went, Miriam saw something change in them, the flicker of ownership returning to their voices, their faces, their hands. Freedom wasn't loud. It crept in soft, but when it rooted itself, it didn't leave. One morning, as the sun broke over the ridge and painted gold across the roof, Sam ran up the porch steps, his cheeks pink with breathless excitement. "Mama," he called, "there's someone comin', a girl. She's walking up the road all alone." Miriam stepped out, her apron still dusted with flour from kneading bread. She squinted toward the horizon. And there she was. Young, thin, maybe no older than 16. Her dress was torn at the hem, her bonnet lopsided, but her stride was steady, determined. She had walked far, that much was plain. Miriam descended the porch slowly. The girl stopped a few feet away, eyes darting between Miriam and the children gathered on the porch behind her. You Miriam?" the girl asked. "I am. I heard folks say you help girls like me, that you know what it's like to run." Miriam stepped closer. "Where'd you come from?" "Dry Ridge. Name was Ned there. I mean, he called himself my husband. Wasn't right. I ran last week. Hid in the back of a freight wagon. Walked the last 10 miles. Miriam nodded. "What's your name?" The girl's lips quivered. "Don't know what to tell people no more. He made me stop saying my real one." Miriam's voice was steady. "Then you get to choose one, right now." The girl looked toward the trees, as if the breeze could offer an answer. "Hope," she whispered. Miriam smiled. "Welcome, Hope." She took the girl's hand and led her inside. Ruth offered her water. Elsie brought a shawl. Sam offered to show her the swing out back, and in the corner Thorn watched it all quietly as he always did, his eyes soft with pride. Hope was the 34th girl. They didn't keep count to boast. They did it to remember, because each one had nearly vanished, and each one now breathed freely on their land. Some nights, after the house was quiet and the lanterns burned low, Miriam would sit alone by the fireplace with the ledger Thorn had made for her. It wasn't fancy, just names written in his careful hand, sometimes a date beside them, sometimes a note about where they'd gone or who they stayed with. She ran her fingers over each one like a prayer. Thorn came to sit beside her, draping a blanket over her shoulders. "You know," he said one night, "every girl you save makes me fall in love with you all over again." She leaned into him. "I don't save them, I just remind them they were never lost. You're still the bravest woman I've ever known." "No," she whispered, "just the freest." Their house had no fancy windows, no grand chandeliers or velvet chairs, but it was full of children's drawings, hand-sewn curtains, the scent of fresh bread and wildflowers. It echoed with footsteps and laughter. It stood like a lighthouse in a world that still sometimes swallowed women whole. One cold night in early winter, a knock came at the door. Not many traveled this far in the snow. Thorn opened it cautiously. A young man stood there, barely grown, coat too thin, eyes filled with fear and confusion. "I'm lookin' for someone," he said. "She left years ago. I was too little to understand then." "Who are you looking for?" Thorn asked. "Mama," the boy whispered. Her name was Irene, Bain took her when I was 6. Miriam stepped into view. Her heart froze. She remembered Irene, quiet, broken, with a limp that never healed right. She stayed with them for 6 months before marrying a kind blacksmith and moving up north. Miriam hadn't heard from her since. She spoke of you, the boy said. Said if I ever needed safety, I should find the woman who held the fire. Miriam's throat closed. Come in, she said. He stayed that winter, grew strong, helped Thorne with the fences, played cards with Sam and shared stories with the girls. By spring, Irene returned with her husband to retrieve him. When she saw Miriam again, they wept like sisters. Word spread over the years. Some called it a refuge. Some whispered it was a rebellion. Some said it was witchcraft, the way girls healed under her roof and never returned to the men who claimed them. But Miriam didn't care for names. She only cared that they came, and that they left stronger. When her first gray streak turned to silver, and her hands no longer worked the soil with ease, she passed the torch to Elsie, who by then had grown tall, graceful, and fearless. Elsie kept the doors open. Sam built another barn. Ruth trained the horses, and Thorne carved a bench under the oak tree so Miriam could sit and watch the land breathe. They were not rich, not in gold, but they were wealthy in ways few understood. Years later, when Miriam finally laid her head down one evening and didn't rise with the sun, it was quiet, peaceful. A fire burned low. The house did not fall into mourning, it held her spirit like a hymn. The children lit candles. Thorne sat beside her bed for hours, her hand in his. He didn't cry that day, but he wept weeks later when he found a note tucked inside her ledger. It read, "To the man who showed me that love does not wound, that kindness is not weakness, that freedom is possible even after the chains have rusted into your bones. I am not leaving. I am woven into every girl who walks this land. Let them walk boldly. Let them never bow. Jem." Thorne folded the letter and placed it back in the ledger. And then he stood, walked outside, and watched the wind carry the scent of wildflowers down the valley. From that day on, every girl who came seeking shelter passed beneath an arch made of ironwood. It bore no grand plaque, just a word carved deep across the top. Free. And they were. The wind over the plains shifted, warmer now. It had been 3 winters since Miriam's passing, and yet there wasn't a soul who'd stepped onto that ranch and didn't feel her presence. Her chair on the porch sat untouched. No one dared sit in it, not out of fear but reverence. It was a quiet thing, like the hush of a church when the candles burn low. Thorne had changed in that time, not in the way people feared after a great loss. He didn't collapse or become bitter or lose the light in his eyes. No, he became gentler somehow, slower in step, softer in tone. He still rose early to fix the fence when the wind knocked it loose, still taught the younger boys how to saddle a horse and the girls how to shoot if they wished. But there was something quieter in him now, as if he heard Miriam's voice in every quiet room and saw her face in every beam of light that filtered through the kitchen window. Elsie took charge, just as Miriam hoped she would, not by command or ambition but by natural pull. The girls listened to her, respected her. She degrown from the shy, soft-voiced child into a woman who could stare down a sheriff or comfort a runaway with the same calm strength. One morning in spring, a young girl named Naomi arrived. She wasn't bruised. She wasn't starved. She wasn't fleeing violence the way so many others had. She was fleeing expectation. Naomi was the daughter of a banker's widow in Carson's Hollow. Her father had passed and left them land, and her mother meant to marry her off to a judge twice her age in return for legal protections. Naomi wanted none of it. She didn't want to live trapped in corsets and pearls, nodding at men in suits, and birthing children for a man she couldn't stand to sit beside. She came to the ranch with 2 books and a bag of sewing needles. That was all. Elsie greeted her on the porch and asked, "What are you looking for?" Naomi replied, "A place to live where no one tells me what I'm worth." And so Naomi stayed. She wasn't like the others. She didn't tend fields or mend fences, but she sewed clothes for every girl on the ranch, stitched tiny initials into each hem, and read aloud in the evenings from her books under the wide porch awning. She had a laugh that made even the most guarded of girls smile, and slowly she bloomed. They carved a second word into the ironwood arch beside free. It said loved. And that's what the place became known as far and wide. A ranch where you could come torn and leave whole. A house where no one asked where you came from, only what you needed. A place built not by wealth, not by legacy, but by one woman's choice to stop being afraid. Miriam never had children in the way others expected her to. But she became the mother of 100 souls. And no one ever dared say she was barren again.